There was a time when buying the right Harley felt almost bulletproof. You picked the model, kept it clean, rode it with pride, and trusted that the value would still be there when the next chapter came. That confidence is getting harder to find. In 2026, the used market is showing something many riders do not want to admit. Some Harley Davidson motorcycles are no longer protected by reputation alone. Buyers are slower, prices are under pressure, and bikes that once looked untouchable are starting to sit longer than they should. Today, we are going through 17 Harleys caught in that shift. Watch until the end, because the bikes near the top reveal where this market is really headed. Number 17, Harley Davidson Nightster. Some motorcycles do not become worthless because they are ugly, weak, or broken. They become worthless because they never win the kind of loyalty that protects a machine once the first owner takes the hit. That is the Nightster in 2026. It is quick enough, sharp enough, and modern enough, but it still lands in an awkward place for older Harley riders who want comfort, heavier road presence, and a stronger sense of bloodline. The Nightster feels more like a side door into the brand than a bike riders dreamed about owning for 30 years. That matters because this audience does not buy only with a calculator. They buy with memory, identity, and the feeling a bike gives them when it sits cooling in the driveway after a long ride. When a motorcycle feels temporary, the market starts treating it that way. The Nightster makes 91 horsepower from 975 cubic centimeters and 72 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using a front 4-piston caliper and rear-floating single-piston caliper. Showa dual bending valve conventional forks, dual outboard emulsion shock. Absorbers, 481 pounds wet, a 27.1-inch seat height, and a starting price of $9,999. Now, we move into a machine that may be capable on the road, but never felt natural to the riders Harley knows best. Number 16, Harley Davidson Pan America 1250 ST. Sometimes the machine is not the problem. Sometimes the problem is the badge on the tank and the riders staring back at it. That is where the ST loses ground in 2026. It is quick and better on pavement than many expected. But older Harley men do not usually spend their money chasing a street-tuned adventure bike with a tall stance and a mission that feels imported into the lineup. The ST earns respect, yet it rarely inspires attachment. That matters in a market where attachment protects resale. Riders raised on Road Kings, Ultras, and Japanese mile eaters usually want a machine that settles into the soul, not one that keeps explaining itself beside touring iron. The ST makes 150 horsepower from 1,252 cubic centimeters and 94 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using front radially mounted monoblock 4-piston calipers and a rear-floating single-piston caliper, a 47mm inverted fork with electronically adjustable preload and manually adjustable compression and rebound, plus a linkage-mounted monoshock with automatic electronic preload control, 546 pounds wet, a seat height of 29.4 inches, and a starting price of $19,999. And this is where modern performance starts clashing with old-school trust. If this is already changing how you see your own bike, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and share your experience below, because riders who've tried to sell recently are seeing things most people still haven't caught yet. Number 15, Harley Davidson Sportster S. Not every bike loses value because it fails. Some lose value because they confuse the riders who should have carried them for years. That is the Sportster in 2026. It is fast, sharp, and modern, yet older Harley men still see a machine wearing a famous family name without carrying the same old soul. That disconnect matters more than younger buyers realize. Riders who grew up respecting low seats, mechanical feel, and long-haul simplicity do not always bond with a bike that looks this aggressive and restless. The Sportster may thrill on a short blast, but emotional trust is what protects resale. And emotional trust gets weaker when a machine feels more like a statement than a companion. The Sportster makes 121 horsepower from 1,252 cubic centimeters and 93 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using a front radially mounted monoblock 4-piston caliper and rear floating single-piston caliper, a 43mm inverted fork with compression, rebound and spring preload adjustability, plus a linkage-mounted piggyback monoshock with compression, rebound, and hydraulic spring preload adjustability. 502 pounds wet, a seat height of 28.9 inches, and a starting price of $15,999. The next bike proves that respect and resale are not always the same thing. Number 14. Harley Davidson Pan America 1250 Special. Sometimes a motorcycle earns respect without ever earning a permanent place in the garage, and that is exactly where the Special gets exposed in 2026. On pavement and gravel, it can do far more than most traditional big twin riders will ever ask from it. Yet, that versatility cuts both ways, because older buyers still lean toward low seats, easier reaches, and touring shapes that feel rooted in the brand they spent decades defending. The Special is not weak, and it is not badly made. It simply asks loyal riders to spend serious money on a mission they admire more than they truly desire, which is why its used market confidence softens faster than its engineering deserves. It makes 150 horsepower from 1,252 cubic centimeters and 94 pound-feet of torque with an anti-lock braking system using front radially mounted monoblock 4-piston calipers and a rear floating single-piston caliper, a front inverted fork assembly with electronically adjustable semi-active damping control, plus a linkage-mounted monoshock with automatic electronic preload control and semi-active compression and rebound damping, 578 pounds wet, a seat height of 31.1 inches, and a starting price of $19,999. Now we get to one that stings more, because this bike looked like it should have been safe. Number 13. Harley Davidson Lowrider ST. There is a reason this one hurts more than some of the stranger bikes on the list. The Lowrider ST looks like a smart buy. It carries club-style attitude, a frame-mounted fairing, real torque, and enough touring sense to make older riders think they found the sweet spot between stripped cruiser swagger and full-dress comfort. That is exactly why its value slide feels personal in 2026. Riders do not see the Lowrider ST as a gimmick. They see a motorcycle that should have been protected by demand. Yet once the market fills with used examples and patient buyers start waiting out the first owner, the numbers turn cold. A machine can feel right on the road and still make less financial sense than expected. The Lowrider ST makes 114 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 128 pound-feet of torque, with dual front disc brakes and a rear disc brake, an inverted single cartridge fork, and hidden free piston coilover monoshock, with hydraulic preload adjustment, 712 pounds in running order, a seat height of 27 inches, and a starting price of $23,999. From here, the problem shifts from smart buying to expensive styling. Number 12. Harley Davidson Breakout. Long, low, and built to stop parking lot traffic, the Breakout sells a dream older riders understand immediately. The trouble starts later, when the dream has to survive real roads, real mileage, and the cold math of resale in 2026. What looked like factory custom swagger begins to feel like a very expensive compromise. Style keeps the Breakout desirable from a distance, yet distance is exactly where much of its value now lives. The stretched stance, giant rear tire, and show bike posture still pull eyes at gas stops, but comfort, cornering ease, and everyday usefulness ask harder questions. Once the shine wears off, riders who grew up loving torque also know that torque alone does not rescue a motorcycle that spends too much of its appeal standing still for long. The Breakout makes 103 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 126 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using a front 4-piston fixed caliper and rear 2-piston floating caliper, a dual bending valve, telescopic fork, and hidden free piston coil-over monoshock with hydraulic preload adjustment, 681 pounds wet, a seat height of 25.6 inches, and a starting price of $22,999. And now we hit a Harley legend that still has presence, but no longer the same protection. Number 11. Harley Davidson Fat Boy. Wide tires and solid wheels still give the Fat Boy a kind of muscle most motorcycles cannot fake. That is exactly why its slide feels so strange in 2026. The bike still looks like a statement, yet the men who once wanted that statement are aging toward comfort, easier handling, and motorcycles that ask less sacrifice once the road stretches past 100 honest miles. The Fat Boy is not weak, it is trapped by its own legend. Riders respect the look, but respect does not always become a sale, especially when buyers start comparing real comfort, real agility, and real long-day usefulness against a machine built as much for presence as purpose. That is where value thins out, because the fantasy stays expensive, while the ownership case gets harder to defend with age and miles. The Fat Boy makes 104 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 126 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system, a front 4-piston fixed caliper and rear 2-piston floating caliper, a dual bending valve telescopic fork, and hidden coil-over monoshock with hydraulic preload. Adjustment: 694 pounds wet, a seat height of 25.9 inches, and a starting price of $22,599. Here's something most riders only realize later. The condition of everything around the bike affects value more than they expect. I've put the gear and essentials that help protect that in the description. Number 10. Harley Davidson Heritage. Classic chrome, leather, and deep fenders used to signal a lifetime motorcycle. Something a man could buy, ride hard, and never feel the need to replace. That promise still lives in the Heritage, but in 2026, the market no longer treats that promise the same way. The look is respected, even admired, yet fewer riders are willing to commit to a machine built around yesterday's idea of long-distance comfort. The Heritage carries history in every line, but history can weigh on value when buyers start asking harder questions about wind protection, seat support, and how a bike holds up across real multi-state miles. Riders who remember the golden era still feel something when they see it, but feeling something does not always lead to a purchase. The pool narrows, and once that happens, resale follows. The Heritage makes 94 horsepower from 1,868 cubic centimeters and 119 pound-feet of torque with an anti-lock braking system, a front 4-piston fixed caliper and rear 2-piston floating caliper, a dual bending valve telescopic fork, and hidden free-piston coil-over monoshock with hydraulic preload adjustment, 719 pounds wet, a seat height of 26.3 inches, and a starting price of $19,999. And now, we hit a Harley legend that still has presence, but no longer the same protection. Number 9. Harley Davidson CVO Street Glide 3 Limited. Chrome, paint, and sheer size can make a machine feel untouchable on the showroom floor. Then ownership begins, and the truth gets heavier. The trike lands here because it asks luxury money from riders who still expect long-haul comfort, honest strength, and lasting pride when the first years are behind them. What hurts the trike is not weak presence. It is the size of the financial bruise waiting after the purchase. Older riders may love the commanding seat, the storage, and the calm three-wheel confidence, but the second-hand crowd is smaller, pickier, and slower to move at this level. When a machine starts above $50,000, every drop afterward feels personal. That is when prestige starts looking more like punishment. The trike makes 114 horsepower from 1,977 cubic centimeters and 138 pound-feet of torque. With an anti-lock braking system, electronic linked braking, front 4-piston fixed calipers, and a rear floating integrated park brake caliper, a dual bending valve front fork, and hand-adjustable emulsion rear suspension, 1,283 pounds in running order, a seat height of 27.3 inches, and a starting price of $54,999. The next one keeps the comfort, the size, and the confidence, but the resale risk does not stay behind. If you're starting to see where this is going, subscribe now, because the next bikes hit even closer to home, and most riders don't realize the real impact until it's too late to avoid the same costly mistake yourself. Number 8. Harley Davidson Street. Glide 3 Limited. Some motorcycles lose value because they miss the moment. Others lose value because they ask aging riders to spend luxury money on comfort and confidence, then discover the secondhand crowd is much smaller than the first one. That is where the trike gets exposed in 2026. The shape feels familiar, the fairing still carries real Harley presence, and the added wheel promises calm miles for riders who want less strain and more stability. Yet the market stays cautious at this price, because buyers with that kind of money can shop many directions, while used shoppers know the pool narrows fast. Once size, weight, and image all move into specialty territory. That hesitation matters, because sentimental appeal alone no longer protects three-wheel machines. The trike makes 105 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 129 pound-feet of torque. With an anti-lock braking system and electronic linked braking using front 4-piston fixed calipers and a rear floating integrated park brake caliper, a dual bending valve front fork, and hand-adjustable emulsion rear suspension, 1,250 pounds in running order, a seat height of 27.3 inches, and a starting price of $39,199. Now the warning gets closer to home for riders who thought touring confidence would be enough. Number 7. Harley Davidson Road Glide 3. There comes a point where comfort stops being enough, and the market starts asking harder questions. That is where the Road Glide 3 gets caught in 2026. It has presence, real touring confidence, and the kind of broad-shouldered fairing older riders recognize instantly. Yet that extra wheel changes the resale conversation before the engine even turns over. To me, the problem is not weakness. It is audience. A rider shopping a trike at this price usually wants easy ownership and lasting assurance, and that makes the used crowd brutally selective. The Road Glide 3 still delivers comfort and swagger, but swagger does not save a machine when secondhand buyers grow narrower, older, and far more careful with money. The Road Glide 3 makes 105 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 129 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system and electronic linked braking using front 4-piston fixed calipers and a rear floating integrated park brake caliper, a dual bending valve front fork, and hand-adjustable emulsion rear suspension, 1,184 pounds in running order, a seat height of 27.9 inches, and a starting price of $35,399. From here, prestige starts becoming part of the problem instead of the solution. Number 6. Harley Davidson CVO Street Glide Limited. Luxury can hide bad decisions longer than steel should. That is why the Limited lands in 2026. It carries finish, comfort, and presence riders admire. Yet once the purchase settles, the financial exposure becomes clear, because this is premium touring sold at a price that leaves no mercy later. What makes the Limited dangerous is that it feels safe. It looks like the final answer for riders wanting comfort, storage, protection, and highway authority. But the used market does not reward first owners for buying the top shelf. It rewards patient buyers who let someone else absorb the hardest loss. And that is a brutal lesson when a machine wearing this much pride starts aging like expensive equipment instead of legend. The Limited makes 115 horsepower from 1,977 cubic centimeters and 139 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using dual front 4-piston fixed radial-mounted calipers and a single rear axial-mounted caliper, a 47mm inverted front fork, and dual adjustable emulsion rear suspension with remote preload adjustment, 921 pounds in running order, a seat height of 29.1 inches, and a starting price of $51,999. And this is where the full-dress touring dream starts running into colder market reality. Number 5. Harley Davidson Road Glide Limited. Long miles can hide a bad buy for a while. The Road Glide Limited feels like the kind of motorcycle a seasoned rider can trust, because it gives you weather protection, passenger room, real luggage, and that broad-shouldered shark nose authority that still means something on an interstate. That is exactly why its value slide hits so hard in 2026. What hurts the Road Glide Limited is not weakness, but timing. And that is what makes the shift harder to ignore. Older riders still respect a full-dress tourer, but used buyers now look at weight, electronics, and price with colder eyes, especially when less expensive touring options can still cross states in comfort. Once that doubt begins to settle in, it changes how the bike is seen, and pride no longer protects the first owner from the quiet drop in value. The Road Glide Limited makes 107 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 129 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using dual front 4-piston fixed axially mounted calipers and a single rear axial mounted caliper, a 49mm dual bending valve fork and dual adjustable emulsion rear suspension with remote preload adjustment, 919 pounds in running order, a seat height of 29.1 inches, and a starting price of $32,999. The next bike shows how even the familiar trusted answer can turn into a costly one. Number 4. Harley Davidson Street Glide Limited. Some motorcycles lose money because they miss the market. The Street Glide Limited loses money because it feels like the right answer. It offers weather protection, storage, passenger comfort, and that familiar bat wing silhouette older riders still trust. Yet trust alone does not protect value in 2026. The trouble starts once buyers compare what they truly need against what they are financing over time. A full-dress tourer still carries meaning for riders who remember real cross-country miles, but age, weight, added electronics, and rising price now push secondhand shoppers towards simpler baggers or older machines that can do nearly the same job for far less money. That shift does not happen overnight, but it builds quietly. In the end, the first owner absorbs most of the financial pain, while the patient buyer steps in later, pays less, and walks away looking far smarter. The Street Glide Limited makes 107 horsepower from 1,923 cubic centimeters and 129 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using dual front 4-piston fixed axially mounted calipers and a single rear axial mounted caliper, a 49mm dual bending valve fork, and dual adjustable emulsion rear suspension with remote preload adjustment, 893 pounds in running. Order a seat height of 29.1 inches and a starting price of $32,999. Now we come back to a bike that may impress on paper, but still struggles to feel right in the garage. Number 3. Harley Davidson Pan America 1250 Limited. Sometimes the machine is impressive and the fit is still wrong. That is why the Limited climbs this high in 2026. It does almost everything well, yet many older Harley riders do not want their expensive garage space filled by a tall adventure bike that feels more like a strategic experiment than a destination. What hurts the Limited is not performance, but an emotional mismatch that shows up the longer someone lives with it. Riders who grew up on Road Kings, Electra Glides, Ultras, and dependable Japanese mile eaters usually want low-slung confidence, easy mounting, and a shape that feels settled before startup. The Limited asks them to trust extra height, more electronics, and a category they may respect without ever truly connecting to. That gap matters more than numbers. It quietly weakens long-term attachment. And once that bond is missing, value starts slipping the moment the first owner decides it is time to move on. The Limited makes 150 horsepower from 1,252 cubic centimeters and 94 pound-feet of torque, with an anti-lock braking system using front radially mounted monoblock 4-piston calipers and a rear floating single-piston caliper, an inverted fork with electronically adjustable semi-active damping control, and a linkage-mounted monoshock with automatic electronic preload control, 661 pounds wet, a seat height of 30.4 inches, and a starting price of $26,499. This next one is harder to accept because it still looks exactly like the kind of Harley riders want. Number 2. Harley Davidson Lowrider S. It starts with a feeling most riders trust without thinking, a bike that looks stripped, purposeful and honest usually earns respect before the engine even fires. That is exactly the space this one lives in. The Low Rider S has always carried that old-school aggression, low stance, dark finishes, and just enough edge to make it feel like a machine built for riders, not showrooms. That is what makes its position uncomfortable. The Low Rider S still feels special, with strong pull and real stability. The problem is not performance. It is how the market reacts. Patient buyers wait, compare, and drive prices down. That pressure never shows early. It appears later in resale numbers and trade-in talks, where expectations slowly start slipping downward. The Low Rider S produces 114 horsepower from 1,923 centimeters and 125 pound-feet of torque, with dual front disc brakes and a rear disc brake, an inverted front fork, and a rear monoshock. With preload adjustment, 670 pounds wet, a seat height of 26.5 inches, and a starting price of $19,999. And at the top sits the bike that says the most about how far this market has shifted. Number 1. Harley Davidson Street Bob. Sometimes the simplest machine carries the most complicated truth. What looks like a bare, honest motorcycle can quietly expose everything happening underneath the market. The Street Bob has always lived in that stripped-down space. No excess, no heavy touring weight, just a straightforward riding experience that feels close to what many riders remember from years back. That is exactly why it lands at the top. When a bike like this loses value, it says more than any luxury model. The Street Bob should feel safe. But rising supply and patient buyers change everything, turning even honest machines into quiet bargaining ground where timing, availability, and waiting reshape what once felt like a sure decision. The Street Bob produces 98 horsepower from 1,823 cubic centimeters and 120 pound-feet of torque, with a single front disc brake and a rear disc brake, a telescopic front fork, and a hidden rear monoshock with preload adjustment, 655 pounds wet, a seat height of 25.8 inches, and a starting price of $15,999. Some of these Harleys still look the part. Some still ride well, but in 2026, looks, badges, and old reputation are not always enough to protect value once the market turns cold. That is the hard truth a lot of riders are starting to face. So now I want to hear from you. Which Harley on this list shocked you the most? And which one do you still think is worth defending? Leave your take in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more straight, no-nonsense breakdowns.